It was masochistic, but I couldn't help myself. 30 minutes on the C2 concept rowing machine, followed by 30 minutes on the damn treadmill, every day for the past 9 months. The only thing that changed was the music. I didn't have a smartphone, but I did have an old MP3 player that had everything I could find on it to drown out the anger. I should probably say drown out the pain, but the anger seemed to grow daily and pushed the pain to the back burner. Scenarios of revenge played out in my brain as the heavy metal clouded the reality around me. Both exercises could be done automatically without thinking or concentrating on what I was doing. For an hour each day, I was in a self-induced trance, wallowing in the rage inspired by my wife's infidelity. After a quick shower at the gym, I began my 3-mile trek to work. Driving would be more practical, but I found that the time spent walking calmed me down. Usually 58 minutes. A little longer if the weather is bad. It's not a fast pace, but enough to keep my heart rate up. After work, I walked the 2 miles home at a more leisurely pace. The weekend messed up the plans a bit, but I was able to fill that time by working around the house a little more than usual. I spent more time mowing, trimming, and edging the grass. Small jobs that I seemed to ignore began to get attention. Painting and caulking became important, filling time. My MP3 player became my best friend. I made a living working as a Volvo mechanic. I specialized in commercial diesel engines, and my certifications were always up to date. There was enough money to put my 2 daughters through college, but we used a second mortgage to offset the cost of tuition rather than burden the girls with student loans. I guess you could say the cause of my marital problems was music. My wife, Robin, favors classical music, which I can't stand. For her sake, I tried for several years to embrace it, but it didn't work out. So we have different preferences in music. That didn't seem like enough to destroy a marriage, but she decided to go further. She began socializing with other people who had similar musical tastes, which led to joining and participating in local music lovers associations. Trips to concerts were on the band's agenda, and she began signing up for anything she could get her hands on. Of course, it never even occurred to her to ask me to accompany her. When the outings started happening overnight, I felt the need to do a little investigating. Serge Gorski was a pianist. He taught at a local college and played with several classical orchestras in the area. He traveled regularly to New York, Philadelphia, and Baltimore to play concerts. My wife was in love with him. Although she hid it for a long time, it was not difficult for me to determine that she was indeed his personal traveling companion. Putting all the facts together, I waited for the right moment and brought it down on her. "Honey, we need to talk." Of course, things didn't go the way I expected. She didn't deny anything, acknowledged everything, and more or less confidently said, "So what?" I'm not a very smart person. I had no response to her reaction. I expected remorse and repentance. What I got was indifference and insolence. In that moment, our lives changed. At first, I was overwhelmed with grief and sadness. The pain was excruciating, but I held myself together. I said nothing to my daughters or anyone else. Robin went on with her life as if nothing had changed. She cooked, cleaned, and ran the house the same way she always had. The only actual change was that I now slept in the guest room. Robin never worked, so she spent all her free time with her friends. Although we still lived in the same house, it was like a brother and sister relationship rather than husband and wife. Her travels and social outings became more daring. Pictures in newspapers and local magazines showed Serge and Robin as a couple. Not once was there any mention of me or that she was married. Over time, my pain gradually turned to anger, and the anger became so strong that I had difficulty controlling it. I didn't start drinking. I turned to the gym. I lost 46 pounds. I was in better shape than I had ever been. I stopped taking my blood pressure and cholesterol medication. I only ate dinner at home, and I was easily able to adjust to what Robin cooked. For every pound I lost, I gained 10 pounds of bitterness. I was turning into a hateful, miserable bastard. Even my friends and co-workers started avoiding me. And then I met Seymour. Seymour had been a regular at the gym for about 2 months before I spoke to him. During my workouts, I kept a low profile and barely socialized. A few people would casually nod at each other or occasionally exchange a quick fist bump. Seymour didn't socialize. Sometimes I caught him talking to himself. When you have headphones in your ears, you don't notice you're singing along with a song or talking out loud. One day he noticed that I was smiling while he was reflecting, and from that moment on we had an easy, casual relationship. We started exercising together on the treadmill, and then I gradually accustomed him to the rowing machine. He was just as focused on the exercise as I was, and I quickly discovered that we had the same motivation. We started having coffee after workouts, which led to occasional lunches. Seymour became my friend, and I felt much better. I finally had someone to sympathize with. I could talk. However, it didn't make things any easier, it just made me angrier. Seymour didn't want to run on the treadmill. He didn't want to run at all. Physically, he was capable of running, but psychologically, he chose not to. His wife, Tricia, was an avid triathlete. About 5 years ago, she had started a fitness program, and it had become her go-to activity. She spent as much time as she could biking, swimming, and running. The worst part was that she wasn't doing it alone. There were marathons and Ironman competitions going on all the time, and she participated in every one she could. Of course, Seymour was never invited. Gene Dickens was a world-class triathlete and was happy to offer Tricia his chaperoning services. Seymour had no trouble finding out that they shared transportation, hotel accommodations, meals, and function meetings. He told his wife about it. She told him to get over it. One evening, after work, while Seymour and I were eating ribs, everything fell into place. Robin was in Washington with Serge, and Tricia was in Hawaii in Kona Ironman with Gene Dickens. The ribs would have been tastier with a few mugs of cold beer, but we made do with unsweetened tea. You know, John, we're a sorry pair of assholes. Seymour didn't laugh when he said that, just shook his head and looked a little glum. Damn it, Seymour, I'm not a cuckold. Oh, really? What do you call two guys who know their wives are cheating on them and accept it? I paused for a moment, considering his words. I waved carelessly at the waitress. Bring us a couple of long necks, please. Seymour, I'm not a cuckold. I'm not going to be a cuckold. Prove it. John, we're both pathetic cuckolds who bury our misery by exercising ourselves to the point of pain. Do your daughters know what's going on? When was the last time you spoke to them? Does your wife talk to your daughters? Thank God I don't have any children to worry about. I raised a cold Yingling. What do you suggest? Seymour only shrugged and took another rib. I started the weekend as usual, with yard work. I had no idea what schedule Robin's would be back on, and I didn't care. I assumed she would stay for the weekend. After a light lunch, I met Seymour at the gym. Tricia wouldn't be back until 5 days later. She told Seymour that triathletes have to decompress or something before the airlines will let them fly. He knew it was mostly bullshit, but he didn't want to change her mind. We never finished the session. I'm done. Damn it, I can't and won't do this anymore. Seymour grabbed a towel and headed for the shower room. Before I could finish paddling, he was already dressed and out the door. He was right. I knew we had to do something. I spent the entire day on Sunday planning. I'd get ideas, but I'd immediately find reasons to dismiss them. The best idea was to just take everything and disappear, but I felt that would leave me with a big hole. I needed some kind of revenge, but who? It had to be all of them. 4 different people needed to be dealt with. Physically, I could never hurt Robin. It was just not in my nature. I was sure Seymour felt the same way about Tricia. However, the 2 boys were a different story. Murder was out of the question, but how to hurt them, that would make sense. Suddenly, it all became clear. I quickly went to the garage and found what I needed, a hammer with a ballpoint pen. Robin came home Sunday night, all glowing. She'd unpacked, showered, and everything, but she didn't share with me any of what she'd experienced over the weekend. I didn't bring it up. After she went to bed, I stayed up to watch TV. John, I'm not going to do that. You're crazy. I don't care how bad it is. I'm not going to kill anyone. No, Seymour, you're not listening. We're not going to kill anyone. We're just going to slow them down a little. That's not what it looks like. I've seen that movie, Strangers on a Train. William Bendix and another guy turned out to be murderers. What you're suggesting is the same thing. I'm not going to do it, John. It was Farley Granger, not William Bendix, and we're not going to kill anyone. Why are we going to do that? And what are we going to accomplish by it? Good. Seymour, why is your wife so infatuated with this guy? What does he have that you don't? that makes her want him? You know exactly what it is. He's a world-class super athlete. There's no way I can match him. I'm just a forklift jockey, and an overweight one at that. So he's using his world-class athlete status to seduce and steal your wife away from you. Do you think that's fair? No. Seymour, this guy thinks he's so much better than everyone else that he can take and use any woman he wants. That's the height of disrespect, and you don't want to hurt him. He's exhausted you, and you're just going to let him get away with it. John, there's no way I can stand up to him. That's the thing, you don't have to. I'll do it. And what's the compromise? Well, there's a world-famous virtuoso pianist who may need professional chiropractic manipulation of his fingers. Can you handle that? That depends on the circumstances. Will I have to use a ballpoint hammer? Seymour, use any damn thing you want. So we agreed. Seymour was still a little insecure, so I said I'd take care of Gina first, and then he'd feel more comfortable taking care of Serge. We spent another 2 hours over ribs, exchanging all the personal information we had with each other. There were a lot of holes in our plan. The problem was that neither of us had any idea what to do or how to do it. Gene was the biggest problem because of his physical attributes. I decided I was going to need some kind of equalizer. Now that I had a new special project in my life, I had completely forgotten about my wife and her lover. I took 10 days of accumulated vacation time. I focused on Gina Dickens. It turned out to be much more complicated than I had imagined. He had a regular 9-to-5 job as an insurance agent, but the rest of his days were much more complicated. Sometimes he'd ride his bike for hours when he could spare the time. In the mornings, he jogged, and 3 nights a week he spent at the local YMCA, swimming laps until the pool closed. On days when it rained, he worked out at the local gym. Of course, 2 or 3 times a week he met with Tricia at his apartment. While I was busy tracking Gene, Seymour was checking up on Serge. We met regularly at the gym, working out, but we didn't discuss how things were going. We didn't even have each other's phone numbers. That was part of the plan. The only thing we had in common was that we were both members of the same gym. Time was running out and I needed to approve something. He used different bike routes all the time. He never jogged the same route. The best I could come up with was the YMCA after swim practice. He parked his car at the back of the building. I spent a lot of time looking for security cameras. I found a few in the front of the building and on the sides, but never saw any in the back. I had discreetly purchased a stun gun at the Craigslist auction, but wasn't sure if it worked or how to test it. I had to take a chance on it. At least it came with an instruction manual. Feeling a little frisky, I bought a $10 balaclava. We spent about 30 minutes on the treadmill, chatting about nothing, when I felt it was time to get down to serious stuff. Seymour, I think you need to take a 10-day vacation as soon as possible. I don't want to know where you're going, but you need to give me dates. Wherever you go, use your credit cards, lots of them. By the time we'd spent another 30 minutes on the Concept C2 rowing machine, Seymour was glowing. Now it was up to me to figure out where I was going. It was raining, a slow rain, but one that made everything around me wet. It was getting close to 10 o'clock, and any minute now, Gene Dickens was going to show up through the back door of the YMCA. Gene's Outback was the only car left in the back lot. I checked again and still couldn't find any security cameras. I put on a balaclava just in case. He got angry when he saw the flat tire. The stun gun worked as advertised, and 5 minutes later, I was on my way home. It didn't make the morning paper, but there was a short story on the evening news about a local resident who had been assaulted and injured the night before at the YMCA. Arrangements are being made to install CCTV cameras in the area to prevent further incidents. There was no word on what injuries he sustained. They had no suspects or motive. I had no idea where Seymour was or when he would return. The hammer, taser, and balaclava had been thrown into 3 different dumpsters downtown. My boss at work wasn't thrilled when I informed him that I was going to Orlando for 3 weeks for a Volvo Penta driver training course. He couldn't see how he would benefit from the marine engine course. I told him I would pay for the course and use more of my accumulated vacation time. He still wasn't happy. I left a note in Seymour's gym locker explaining that I would be out of town until the end of June. Robin, I have to go to Orlando for 3 weeks of training. Would you like to come with me, or would you rather stay home and rest? John, the summer concert season is in full swing. You know how much I love events in the park. I'd rather stay here. You'll be in class most of the time anyway, won't you? Yes. Besides, it's a little sweltering in the summer. I understand why you don't want to go, but I feel like I should ask. Thanks, sweetie. I appreciate your offer, but I'd probably be more comfortable here. Maybe we can think about a short trip later in the summer. Maybe a weekend in New England or something like that. Of course, this conversation went exactly as I expected. Now on to the next phase of the plan. There was no further news of Gina Dickens. I left at dawn on Saturday and planned to make it to Orlando in 2 days, including a stop at the Tennessee Aquarium in Chattanooga. You have to get your priorities right. Luckily, the school had a long-term rental that included cooking. I didn't feel like eating out every day. I called Robin and let her know I had gotten there safely. If you want to read the newspaper online, you pay $1 a month. I took care of that as soon as I got settled. Starting tomorrow, I would scrutinize all news from home, paying special attention to police reports. I couldn't wait to see if Seymour would keep his end of the bargain. I was also anxious to see if he would get some kind of a thrashing from the police about the Dickens incident. There was a Planet Fitness about a mile from the house. I used my guest privileges card. The first week of my vacation was boring, the second week was interesting, and the third week was great. Of course, I'm not referring to my school training. Everything was top-notch. Every day I read the entire newspaper looking for something interesting. There was a concert at the Brandywine Battlefield that a friend of my wife's organized. I'm sure she enjoyed that little outing. Late the following week, there was a front-page article about the heinous attack on Serge Gorski, a local university professor and symphony orchestra director. The police felt it was some sort of professional vendetta, as the only injuries he sustained were to both hands. Comparisons were made to the recent attack on Jean Dickens, but they were unable to link the two incidents. At this point, there are no suspects. I spent the rest of the evening with a package of black and tan, trying to figure out where, when, and how Seymour had pulled this off. I really didn't want to know, but it was fun to think about. The next morning, one of the administrators at Volvo Penta High School informed me that some official from Pennsylvania had called and confirmed that I was indeed attending school and hadn't missed any scheduled classes. I expected nothing less. I was curious as to when my wife would let me know. I hadn't heard from her in several days. In preparation for her call, I went out and bought another package. The call never came. The last week of school turned out to be the best. We had half a day of interviews with potential employers. I was not expecting that. As it seemed to me, any offer would have been a good one. My age, experience, and willingness to relocate gave me some advantage over most of the other students. I got the offer I wanted, and it was easy for me to make a choice. On the way home, I decided to make a quick stop to check things out. There was still no follow-up article in the paper about the mysterious attacks. Robin never called again. Perdido Bay Marina was actually in Alabama, but you could see Florida across the water. Bill Morgan willingly showed me his pride and joy. In addition to overhaul and maintenance, they had a large multi-level warehouse. There were half a dozen boats parked at the dock. The crowning glory of it all was a small mobile home in the backyard that he said I could use for free. I asked him to tell me more about the storage unit, which he said was favored by bullfinches. After telling me about the job, he jokingly asked if I had any experience with a forklift. I immediately thought of Seymour. Arriving home was somewhat anticlimactic. I was quickly hugged and kissed on the cheek by my loving wife. I made several attempts at some light conversation, but Robin didn't respond with anything more than light chatter. She didn't mention Serge at all. I didn't insist, but smiled to myself. I showered, changed, and we enjoyed a light dinner. I'd been gone 25 days, and it was as if I'd never left. I was looking forward to a good workout at the gym in the morning. He was there when I arrived. "Good morning, Seymour." "Good morning, John." We continued working out for about 20 minutes without saying anything. It was a little weird. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "Coffee, Seymour." "Damn, I thought you'd never ask." We didn't even bother to shower or change. We just grabbed our stuff and headed across the street to Mickey D's. John, how are you doing? Quiet. It's like I never left. If I hadn't read about what happened in the paper, I never would have found out. And you? Just the opposite. Trisha is furious and taking her anger out on me. The police completely exonerated me, but she's convinced I had something to do with his attack. She spends more time at his place playing nurse than she does at home. She's even stayed over a couple times. In a way, it's even relaxing. I like spending time away from her more than I like spending time with her. You did a good job with him. His triathlon days are over. I wasn't sure. I never read about exactly what injuries he had. Did the police give you a hard time? Damn right they did. They went through my phone records and bank accounts trying to link me to his attack. After a week or so, they finally gave up. Trisha was the driving force behind trying to get me indicted. Just curious, but where did you go? I was on a windjammer cruise out of Rockland, Maine. I enjoyed myself immensely. Good for you. I had to sit in a classroom 8 hours a day for 3 weeks. So what now, John? I don't know about you, but I'm getting out of here. I have a job near Pensacola, and I'm leaving at the end of the week. Are you going to divorce her? No. I'm just taking everything and leaving. If she wants a divorce, let her file for divorce. I'm interested to see if good old Serge will step up and accept her or leave her. What about your house and belongings? I'm leaving her everything except the money in the bank. She'll get the mortgage, car payments, utilities, and a Kohl's credit card. That gives me something to think about. You'll let me know where you'll be, won't you? Sure, by the way, did Serge give you any trouble? Not very much. The day before, I sprayed the cameras in the garage with wasp spray and used a kitchen hammer to finish the job. 1 swift blow to the head and then half a dozen blows to each arm. I even made sure to hit both of his thumbs. He never saw me. He wasn't home yet when I left. Robin wasn't home when I got home from the gym. I took a quick shower and headed to work. The boss wasn't happy when I tendered my resignation. I emptied all of my bank accounts except for a few $100s. I closed all credit cards. We usually kept a zero balance on them. After another quiet dinner with my wife, I grabbed a beer and headed to the den. I pulled out my passport, birth certificate, and DD 214. I didn't want to take anything else with me. The tools from work were in the back seat of the Subaru. The only things left to take were my clothes and laptop. Robin was friendly, but still very quiet and reserved. The next morning, she left somewhere early. She stopped telling me where she was going over a year ago. I guess she thought I didn't need to know about it. It took me less than 30 minutes to load the Outback. I grabbed the George Foreman at the last minute. It just seemed like a good idea. I was on US 81 highway near Luray when I decided to notify Seymour of my departure. It was a short text message, Perdido Bay Marina. Whatever he decided to do, I was fine with it. It only took me a few weeks to settle in. My phone was off the whole time. The job was different, but the same, if that makes any sense. Most of my free time was spent setting up the trailer. It worked fine, but it required a little love and attention. The second bedroom became a place to collect junk. A quarter mile from the marina was a small diner that was open 24 hours a day. I began eating almost all of my meals there. Unfortunately, the nearest gym was 7 miles away, so I decided to take up jogging. I didn't like it, but I exercised anyway. At least there were no hills. And then my first guest showed up. Seymour, you found it? Not so hard, John. The GPS led me right to it. Bob's your uncle. Who the hell is Bob, I thought. Are you just passing through, or are you staying? I'll stay if you have room. There's nowhere to come back to. We spent an hour or so getting Seymour settled into the second bedroom and then had dinner at the diner. Seymour had been driving straight down the road, 16 hours, and was dead tired. I left him to sleep the next morning. Bill Morgan hired Seymour right away. He hated using forklifts and was more than happy to turn them in. The pay wasn't great, but Seymour didn't seem to mind. He just wanted to make sure he had enough to live on. He had a stash of cash that he brought with him. Later, I drove him to Foley to get a safety deposit box at the same bank as me. The trailer wasn't that secure. Trisha kept insisting to the police that Seymour was guilty of assaulting Gene Dickens. They couldn't prove anything. His alibi in Maine was solid, and no accomplices could be found. Naturally, relations between the two quickly soured. Trisha demanded that Seymour get out of the house, but he refused to do so. Eventually, she moved in with Dickens, and 2 days later, Seymour ran away. I decided it was time to contact my daughters. I called the eldest, Clara, first. As soon as I said hello, she hung up. Cora, my youngest, was more blunt. She called me an inconsiderate bastard, after which she hung up. I made an attempt and failed miserably. Good thing I wasn't stuck with 2 expensive weddings in the future. I turned the phone off. Seymour and I got into a routine pretty quickly. I jogged about 5 miles every morning, and then we met at the diner for breakfast. They made a small portion of a low-carb breakfast especially for me. We ate lunch whenever it was convenient. After a couple of weeks, things changed. For the past 6 months, R.G. Martin had been living at Nordic Tug in Slip 16. She had no ground transportation, so Seymour was happy to give her a ride when she needed to go somewhere. I soon lost my dinner companion and soon lost my breakfast companion. It wasn't long before the second bedroom in the trailer was once again a junk room. Seymour was happy, and I was happy for him. Every time I tried to talk to him about her, he was evasive. Bill Morgan wasn't any help either. He was just happy that she paid her docks and utilities on time. She never asked for any special treatment. Something was going on, but as long as Seymour was happy, I stayed out of it. I seemed to have lost track of time. It had been almost a year since I'd left. I hadn't spoken to my wife, my daughters, or anyone else at home. Once in a while, Seymour, Argy, and I would go out to dinner, and we always had a good time. I was able to find out that Argy was from Ohio, that she was a military wife and had no children. She never mentioned her husband, and I wasn't going to ask. Argy always wanted to go eat in Foley or Gulf Shores, but refused to go to Pensacola. It was a strange quirk, but I was able to live with it. Monday morning, everything fell into place. It had been raining all night and didn't look like it was going to stop. Instead of my usual jog, I put on my old army poncho and wandered over to the diner. I was just finishing my second cup of coffee when I saw a familiar car pull up to the dock. It was a green Subaru Outback that belonged to Jean Dickens. A woman who turned out to be Tricia got out of the car, opened her umbrella, and rushed toward the marina office. After a minute, she opened the door and waved to the driver. Jean got out of the car and limped toward the office, trying unsuccessfully to dodge the raindrops. "Damn it, Seymour, answer the phone." Finally, I was answered. "Seymour, you're in trouble. How soon can you get off and get the hell out of here?" "What the hell are you talking about? Slow down! Your wife is here, and Jean Dickens is with her. They're in the office right now, talking to Bill. It's your choice. You can talk to her or sneak out quietly. I think the rain will be a good cover." "John, this will take me at least 15 or 20 minutes. Can you hold them off a little longer?" "I'll try. Move your ass." My next call was to Bill. He grinned slightly, agreeing to send the uninvited guests to my trailer instead of Argy's. I got back to the trailer just as they were leaving the office. Of course, I invited them in and tried to kill as much time as possible. I chatted casually with the man I'd attacked less than a year ago, maimed and mutilated, and hoped to hide behind my newly acquired facial hair. They never said why they'd come or why they were looking for Seymour. I didn't ask. As we walked to the dock, the rain eased to a gray drizzle. The fog made the tugboat barely visible across the bay, but I was the only one looking at it. They just stared at the empty dock. After 5 minutes, the vessel disappeared completely. I didn't identify myself or say how I knew Seymour. They didn't ask. I bowed out to get back to work. Shortly afterwards, they left. I never saw Seymour again. A few months later, Phil Martin, Argy's brother-in-law, visited us. He was looking for Warren, who was Argy's husband. The last time Phil had been in contact with his brother was over a year ago. Warren and Argy docked at the Blackwater Bay Marina in Pensacola. The Escambia County Sheriff's Department had several domestic disturbance reports filed against the couple, and then they suddenly stopped. Warren Martin was retired from the U.S. Air Force, and his retirement checks were still being cashed, even though no one had seen him or his wife in over a year. I had no idea how he had tracked Argy to the marina. Perhaps it was just an assumption. Another 6 months passed. I missed Seymour. The job was steady, but it was starting to bore me. I spent my evenings with my black and tan, trying to decide if I should look for a companion or maybe try a change of venue. I avoided bars and never went to church. The gym was a little awkward, and none of the waitresses at the diner were interesting enough to date. I finally got interested enough to contact Volvo Penta again. They had two good openings, one in Biloxi and one in Galveston. There was no way I could make up my mind. I was trying to pick one of them at lunch when I was rudely interrupted. "Hey, John, you're a hard man to find." Robin looked old and tired. The last 2 years hadn't been favorable to her. "I'm sorry. I wasn't hiding. Why such a surprise visit?" She held out an envelope across the table. "Your final divorce papers. I thought you might need them. I filed for divorce a year from now." "If you knew where I was, why did you have to come here? You could have just mailed them." "I don't know, probably to get some closure. You screwed me over big time, but I guess I deserved it." "That wasn't my intention. I just wanted to get away so you could be with Serge. I felt like I was holding you back." "Well, you didn't leave me much. With no money and a foreclosed house that the bank ended up taking, what really pissed me off was that you took George Foreman." "I thought your lover might have backed up. By the way, where is he?" "Things didn't go well for Serge after the accident. He went back to Estonia about 6 months ago." "You didn't go with him?" "I wasn't invited." I didn't say anything back. "Serge was a little offended. He thought you had something to do with his attack. Things seemed to get better between us after that." "And now what?" "Clara got married last June and they moved to Ocala. I'm going to move in with them and play the role of grandmother. On the way, I decided to make a little detour to deliver your newspapers." Silly me. I sat there like a fool, waiting for some sort of apology, but none came. It was as if she still kept rubbing my face after that time. There was no remorse or regret on her part. "Well, Robin, I'm glad you stopped by. I'm sorry I missed Clara's wedding, but I guess she didn't want me there anyway. I'm also sorry things didn't work out with you and Serge. I know how important that was to you. Is there anything else before you leave?" "Yes, I want the George Foreman. I picked Biloxi. It was only 2 hours away. The casino is fun. I got her a goddamn George Foreman."